Hi, beautiful souls, and thank you for being here. This story is about love that grows quietly, between two hearts that have walked through pain, loss, and long nights of trying again. It is about second chances, gentle strength, and the kind of love that reminds you there is still warmth after the cold. If you have ever fought for peace, carried hope through hard days, or learned to love again when it scared you most, this story is for you. Let us begin. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, taxis blaring, strangers rushing past each other, steam curling up from manholes like breath from an overworked heart. New York was always alive, but for Monique Edwards this morning felt like survival, not routine. Her heels clicked unevenly against the wet pavement as she guided her 7-year-old daughter through the crowd. Kayla's small hand clutched hers tightly, her pink coat a bright flash against the grey of the city. "Mommy, are we late?" Kayla asked, her voice soft but worried. Monique exhaled, her breath visible in the November chill. "A little, but we're going to make it." "Okay." The babysitter had cancelled at dawn, and with rent already overdue, missing this interview wasn't an option. She'd spent the bus ride mentally rehearsing her pitch, her education, her ideas, her experience, but no amount of confidence could hide the truth. She was a single mother, walking into a corporate world that rarely forgave that kind of truth. As they crossed 57th Street, a paper bag burst open in front of them, apples rolling in all directions. An older man, stooped and startled, tried to gather them, muttering apologies. Without thinking, Monique bent down, scooping up apples and handing them back, her neat slacks brushing the wet concrete. "Here you go," she said kindly, "no harm done." The man smiled, his eyes glistening with gratitude. "Bless you, young lady." Monique returned his smile, then stood, brushing her hands clean. She didn't notice the tall man across the street watching her, the one with the camel coat and the expression of quiet curiosity. Dennis Turner had seen kindness before, manufactured, transactional, but there was something about this moment that caught him off guard. The woman didn't look around to see if anyone noticed her good deed. She simply helped, smiled, and moved on. He found himself still watching as she took her daughter's hand again and hurried toward the same building he was about to enter. By the time Monique reached the Turner and Reed headquarters lobby, her pulse was a steady drumbeat. The marble floors gleamed under bright lights. Everything about the place, the hushed voices, the smell of coffee and money felt foreign. "Hi, I'm Monique Edwards," she said to the receptionist, her voice steady, despite the weight in her chest. "I have an interview with Mr. Collins at 10. The woman's eyes flickered briefly to Kayla. "And this is?" "My daughter," Monique said evenly. "I couldn't arrange a sitter this morning, but she'll sit quietly while I'm sorry." The receptionist interrupted with a smile that wasn't really a smile. Children aren't usually allowed in the executive area. Monique's stomach tightened. "I understand, but—" The elevator dinged open. A man in a navy suit stepped out, middle-aged, crisp, the kind who looked at people and calculated their worth before speaking. "Ms. Edwards," he asked. "I'm Richard Collins. You're here for the analyst position?" "Yes, sir." His eyes flicked to Kayla, then back. His lips thinned. "I see. Well, let's make this quick." Inside the conference room, Monique tried to stay composed. Kayla sat quietly in the corner, her little notebook open, drawing flowers. Monique's heart swelled with pride, her daughter so gentle, so understanding. So Collins began flipping through her resume. "You've been out of full-time work for almost 8 years. "Yes," Monique replied, meeting his gaze. "I took time off after my daughter was born. I've done consulting work since. Data analytics, strategy development. Freelance, I see." His tone was dry. "You must understand, Ms. Edwards, we're looking for candidates who can dedicate themselves fully to the company. Long hours, business travel, high pressure. This isn't a 9 to 5. "I understand that," she said calmly, "and I can handle the pressure. My work ethic speaks for itself." He gave a polite chuckle. "I'm sure it does. But bringing a child to an interview doesn't exactly demonstrate readiness for a professional environment." The word stung, but she didn't flinch. Her fingers curled against her notebook. "With respect, Mr. Collins, readiness isn't about circumstance. It's about resilience. And I've built mine every single day." The air went still. Even Kayla stopped drawing. Then the door opened. A man stepped in, the same man from the crosswalk. Tall, calm, eyes like quiet sunlight through glass. "Dennis Turner, CEO, everything all right here?" he asked, his voice smooth, even warm. Mr. Turner, Collins straightened. We're just wrapping up an interview. Ms. Edwards here. Dennis's gaze shifted from Collins to Monique, then to the little girl sitting quietly in the corner. Something in his chest tightened. I believe I saw you this morning, Dennis said softly to Monique. You helped an older man with his groceries. Monique blinked. Yes, I did. He smiled faintly. That was you. I thought so. Collins frowned. Sir, Miss Edwards is here for the analyst role. But as I was explaining, her situation might make the job a difficult fit. Dennis's tone changed slightly, not unkind but firm. And her situation is, she's a single mother. She brought her child to the interview. Dennis looked at Monique again, his expression unreadable. And yet she still showed up on time, well prepared, and I assume qualified. Collins hesitated. Well, yes, but then I'd say that's a testament to her discipline, not a disqualification. Silence filled the room. Dennis turned to Monique. If you don't mind, Miss Edwards, I'd like to hear your thoughts on our company's stagnating growth. You've done consulting, what would you change? It was the kind of question that could crush an unprepared candidate. But Monique straightened, eyes bright. I'd start by listening, she said. You've got great talent, but your structure's too rigid. People work in fear of failure instead of for innovation. You need a culture shift, not just a revenue plan. Dennis smiled, the kind of smile that revealed both surprise and admiration. I couldn't have said it better. He closed the folder in front of her. Welcome to Turner and Reed, Miss Edwards. You'll start Monday. Collins looked as if someone had just taken the air out of the room. Monique blinked. Sir, I thank you. I won't let you down. Dennis nodded once. I don't think you will. As he left the room, Kayla looked up from her drawing. Mommy, was that the boss? Monique smiled through the whirlwind in her chest. Yes, baby. That was the boss. Kayla grinned. He was nice. Outside the building, the cold air hit her cheeks. Monique held Kayla's hand tightly, her heart still racing. You did it, Mommy, Kayla said, bouncing on her toes. Monique laughed softly, the sound trembling on the edge of tears. We did it, sweetheart. She looked back at the tower of glass behind her, sunlight glinting off its surface. Somewhere high above, Dennis Turner was probably back in his office, drinking coffee, reading reports. Yet his words lingered in her mind. You showed up. You were prepared. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as a burden, not as a statistic, but as a woman capable of rebuilding her life. That evening, Dennis stood by his office window. The city sprawled beneath him in a sea of golden lights. His assistant had dropped her file off on his desk. He hadn't meant to open it, but curiosity won. Monique Edwards, 30 years old, Tulane University graduate, former data strategist, left the workforce after childbirth. A single mother who helped a stranger on the street and faced condescension without flinching. He set the file down, his reflection ghosted against the glass. For a long moment, he simply stared at the skyline. He wasn't sure why she lingered in his thoughts. Maybe it was the way she spoke, or the strength beneath her calm. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, dignity intact, even when the world had given her every reason to fall apart. Whatever it was, he knew this much. Something had shifted today. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Harlem, Monique tucked Kayla into bed. The hum of the city filled the quiet. Mommy, yes, sweetheart. Do you think that man, the boss, is an angel? Monique chuckled softly. An angel? Why would you think that? Because he helped you. He saw you. Monique paused, her throat tightening. Maybe he's just a good man. Kayla smiled sleepily. Good men are angels too. Monique leaned down and kissed her forehead. Then maybe he is. She turned off the lamp and stood by the window for a moment, watching the city lights blur into stars. Somewhere out there, fate had begun to turn quietly, gently, like the first flicker of dawn. And though she didn't know it yet, the man who saw her today would one day love her enough to change both their lives forever. 6 months had passed since that morning, the morning that had rewritten the rhythm of Monique's life. Now she was the quiet force behind Turner and Reed's revival. Charts that once sank were climbing. Clients who had drifted away were returning. And her ideas, sharp, human, alive, were changing the language of the company. And yet, every time she stepped into the executive wing, she could feel Dennis Turner's presence before she saw him. It was a Tuesday morning. The boardroom was filled with tension and the scent of fresh espresso. Executives debated over quarterly forecasts, voices rising like static. Dennis sat at the head of the table, calm and measured, until Monique spoke. "If we focus on numbers without understanding people," she said, her voice steady but firm, "we'll always chase growth instead of building it." The room fell quiet. Dennis looked at her, the faintest smile at the corner of his lips. "What do you propose?" Monique clicked to the next slide. "Listen to your team. Reward creativity, not just results. People fight harder when they feel seen." He nodded slowly. "Continue," she did. And for the next 15 minutes, every person in that room listened. When she finished, Dennis said simply, "That's our new strategy." Afterward, as the room emptied, Dennis lingered. "Brilliant work," he said quietly. Monique smiled, adjusting her files. "Thank you. I just did what needed to be done." He studied her for a moment, the faint tiredness under her eyes, the way she hid her exhaustion behind grace. "You do that a lot, don't you?" "What?" "Carry the weight and call it duty." Her heart skipped. She wasn't used to being seen so clearly. "I guess I've had practice." He smiled faintly. "You make it look easy." "It's not." He nodded, his voice softening. "If you ever need help, you know my door's open." She gave him a polite smile. "Thank you, Mr. Turner, but I'm used to standing on my own 2 feet." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe that's the problem." Before she could respond, he walked out, leaving behind a silence that lingered long after the echo of his footsteps faded. That night, Monique worked late. The city outside was a blur of golden glass. Kayla was at her neighbor's for a sleepover, which meant the apartment would be empty when she got home. She rubbed her eyes, staring at the glow of her computer screen, when the elevator door opened. Dennis stepped out, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking nothing like the CEO everyone else feared. "You're still here," he said, walking closer. Monique turned in her chair, startled. "So are you?" "I could say I came to check on the reports," he said, placing a coffee cup beside her. "But that would be a lie." She arched a brow. "So why did you come?" He met her gaze. "To make sure you're not carrying the whole company on your back again." She laughed softly. "I'm fine, I know." "You always are." He leaned against the edge of her desk, watching her. "But it's okay to not be sometimes." There was something in his voice, gentle and unguarded, that made her chest tighten. "Dennis," she began, his name strange but warm on her tongue. "I can't afford distractions." "Not here, distraction?" He smiled faintly. "Is that what I am?" She looked away, flustered. "You're my boss, and you're the most extraordinary woman I've ever met." Her heart trembled. "Don't." "Why not?" "Because men say things they don't mean." Her voice cracked, raw, too honest. "And when they leave, women like me are left cleaning up the mess." Dennis stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm not him, Monique. You don't even know me. I do. I've watched you fight through every storm and never lose your kindness. I've watched you make this company breathe again. And I've watched you walk out every night alone, pretending you don't deserve to be loved." Her throat tightened. "That's not fair." "It's the truth." She stood, suddenly needing space. "You can't say things like that." He took a slow breath, trying to steady the air between them. "Then I'll stop talking." Before she could ask what he meant, he leaned in, not to kiss her, not yet, but close enough for her to feel the heat of his breath. "Tell me to go," he whispered. She hesitated. Her pulse thundered. Every part of her wanted to lean into the warmth she'd denied herself for years. But fear won. "Go," she whispered. He nodded once, stepped back and walked away. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime. Monique stood there, trembling, the scent of his cologne lingering like memory. Days passed, and she threw herself deeper into work. But the tension between them only grew stronger. Quiet glances, brief touches, words that said too much. At a charity gala that Friday, Monique arrived in an emerald dress that seemed to catch every flicker of light. She hadn't planned to attend, but Dennis had asked her personally. When he saw her enter the ballroom, his breath caught. She looked like the kind of miracle life rarely offered twice. He crossed the room to meet her. "You look," his voice faltered, "incredible." "Thank you," she said, her tone soft but careful. They danced later, slow and hesitant. The room glowed with champagne laughter, the hum of violins, and the quiet ache of 2 people trying not to fall. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she whispered. "Like what? Like you mean it?" His lips curved faintly. "That's the only way I know how." She looked away, blinking fast. "You don't understand, Dennis. I can't afford to lose myself again. Not when I have Kayla. Not when I've just started to stand on my own." He nodded, his voice gentle. So I'm not asking you to lose yourself. I'm asking you to let me walk beside you. Her hand tightened in his. You make it sound so easy. It's not easy, he said. It's love. It never is. The song ended, but they didn't move apart immediately. The world around them blurred, chandeliers, music, laughter fading into something softer. For a moment, she imagined what it would be like to stop fighting, to let him in, to believe that maybe, this time, love wouldn't leave her behind. Then the applause snapped her back. She pulled away, murmuring, I should go. Monique, he said softly, but she shook her head. Please, she said, her voice trembling, don't make me believe in something I can't have. He didn't stop her. He just watched her walk away, the crowd parting around her like mist, until she disappeared through the glass doors and into the New York night. Later that evening, she stood alone on her apartment balcony. The city glittered beneath her, alive and distant. Kayla was asleep inside, her little snores muffled under blankets. Monique wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the ache that wouldn't leave. She thought of Dennis, his voice, his eyes, the gentleness that scared her more than cruelty ever had. She had loved once. She had believed once, and when that love had shattered, she'd promised herself never again. But Dennis, he didn't feel like the others. He wasn't charming her with promises. He was simply there, steady, patient, waiting. Her phone buzzed. A message from him read, I'll never push, but I'll never stop caring either. Good night, Monique. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. In his penthouse across the city, Dennis stood by his window, staring out into the lights that seemed endless. He thought of her fire, her grace, her fierce independence. He had everything money could buy, but nothing that ever felt like peace. Until her. He whispered to the empty room, I'll wait for you, however long it takes. And in another part of the same city, a woman who swore she'd never trust love again whispered to the night, Please don't make me hope. Neither knew it yet, but hope, quiet, patient, stubborn, had already begun to take root between them. November had arrived again, colder this time, the kind of cold that carried loneliness in its breath. The city was wrapped in its pre-holiday rush, lights blooming in every window, laughter spilling from cafes and corners where love lived easily. But inside Monique's apartment, the world felt smaller, quieter. She sat at her kitchen table, bills spread out before her like accusations. The rent had gone up again, groceries cost more, and the heater made that tired sound that meant it might give out any day now. Kayla was coloring beside her, humming softly, unaware of the storm that kept her mother's chest tight. Monique rubbed her temple and whispered under her breath, You're okay, but she wasn't sure she was. At work she was unstoppable, sharp, confident, indispensable. At home she was a woman balancing on the edge of exhaustion, trying to give her daughter a childhood that didn't feel like survival. And lately, Dennis Turner's presence had become the quiet ache she couldn't ignore. He hadn't pushed her since that night at the gala. He hadn't flirted or crossed lines. But he was there, in small gestures that said everything words couldn't. An extra coffee on her desk every morning, an umbrella waiting by her chair when it rained. Notes that simply said, I believe in you. She told herself it was kindness. She told herself not to read into it. But every time he looked at her, truly looked, something inside her shifted, like a door she'd bolted shut was beginning to open. Mommy. Monique blinked, realizing she'd been staring at the same bill for 10 minutes. Yes, sweetheart. Are we having Thanksgiving this year? Monique smiled faintly. Of course we are. Just like always. But last year we went to Auntie Pam's, and she said her oven broke, remember? Yes, and we ended up eating Chinese takeout. Kayla giggled. That was fun. Monique reached over and tucked a curl behind her daughter's ear. Then maybe we'll do that again this year. Kayla grew quiet, thinking, then asked softly, Can we invite Mr. Turner? The question caught Monique off guard. Mr. Turner. Why would you say that? Because you smile when he calls, Kayla said simply, and he looks at you like he wants you to be happy. Monique's heart squeezed. Sweetheart, Mr. Turner is my boss. He's busy. People like him don't have time for little dinners like ours. Kayla frowned. That's not true. Maybe he just needs someone to ask. Monique chuckled. Well, you can ask him if you like. Kayla's eyes brightened, the kind of spark that always made Monique nervous, because it meant her daughter was already planning something. The next day, while Monique was in a meeting, Dennis's assistant brought in a sealed envelope addressed in childish handwriting. To Mr. Turner it read with a small heart drawn beside it. He smiled, curious, and opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter written in purple crayon. Dear Mr. Turner, hi, it's Kayla. I hope it's okay that I'm writing to you. Mommy doesn't know. Mommy works all the time. Sometimes she forgets to eat, and I have to put a blanket on her when she falls asleep at the table. She says she's not tired, but I know she is. She's been tired for a long time. When she talks about work, she smiles different, like she forgets to be sad. I think you make her feel that way. You're the only person who makes her laugh like she used to. I like when she laughs. The house feels warm when she does. We're having Thanksgiving at home. Just me and Mommy. It's not fancy, but I saved you a seat. I think you should come. Maybe if you do, Mommy will smile like that again. Love, Kayla. Dennis read it twice, then a third time, his vision blurring halfway through. He sat back in his chair, pressing the letter to his chest, overcome by something raw and unexpected. He'd closed deals worth millions without flinching, but this undid him. A child's letter, a small apartment, a mother too proud to ask for help. He reached for his phone, his voice quiet when his assistant answered. Cancel my dinner reservation for Thursday. I have somewhere else to be. Thanksgiving evening came quietly. The sky was already dark by 5, the wind sharp against the glass. Monique had spent the afternoon cooking. Roasted chicken instead of turkey, mashed potatoes, and the sweet potato pie her mother used to make. She wasn't expecting guests. She didn't know about the letter. She had just set the table, 2 plates, 2 glasses, when there was a knock on the door. Mommy, someone's here, Kayla squealed, racing to open it. Monique frowned. Sweetheart, wait. The door swung open. Dennis stood there, holding a small bouquet of lilies and a store-bought pie, his hair slightly tousled from the wind. He looked nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms, just a man standing awkwardly in a hallway, holding hope in his hands. Mr. Turner? Monique gasped. What are you? Kayla invited me, he said gently, handing her the letter. I couldn't say no. Monique turned to her daughter, who smiled up at her, completely unbothered. You said I could ask. Dennis smiled softly. May I come in? She hesitated only a second before nodding. Of course, come in. The warmth of the apartment wrapped around him as he entered. It smelled like cinnamon, roasted chicken, and something else. Something that felt like home. Dinner was simple, imperfect, and beautiful. Kayla told stories about school, about the class hamster and her drawings, about how her mom made the best pancakes in the world. Dennis listened with genuine delight, laughing easily. Monique, at first tense, began to relax. The way Dennis spoke to Kayla, gentle, attentive, melted something in her. He didn't talk at her. He listened like every word mattered. After dinner, he helped clear the dishes, ignoring her protests. You cooked. I'll clean. When the plates were washed, and Kayla had fallen asleep on the couch, Monique sat beside him, the room quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. She wrote you that letter without telling me, Monique said softly. I'm glad she did, Dennis replied. Monique smiled, looking down. You must think I'm a mess. Rent's going up. My heater's dying. And now my daughter's inviting my boss over for dinner. He shook his head. I think you're extraordinary. She looked up, startled. Do you know how rare it is, he continued, his voice low, to meet someone who fights every day but still chooses kindness? You've built a world for your daughter out of strength and love. That's not a mess, Monique. That's grace. Her throat tightened. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because I'll start believing them. He smiled. Good. Because they're true. Silence lingered, warm, fragile. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered, just long enough for her to feel the tremor beneath the calm. I told myself I'd wait, he said softly, but waiting doesn't stop what I feel. Monique's voice was barely a whisper. Dennis, I'm not here to rescue you, he said. I'm here to stand beside you, to make sure you never have to face anything alone again. Her eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. You don't know how many times I've wished someone would say that and mean it. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing the corner of her lip. I mean every word. And this time when he leaned in, she didn't stop him. The kiss was slow, hesitant, the kind that carried years of silence and longing in its breath. It wasn't desperate. It was discovery, the quiet realization that love, real love, had found its way back to her. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his. You scare me, she whispered. He smiled gently. Then we're even. Because you undo me. Later that night, after he left, Monique stood by the window, her heart still trembling. Kayla's letter lay open on the table. She picked it up, tracing her daughter's handwriting with her fingertips. The child had seen something before she had, something she'd been too afraid to name. Outside, snow had begun to fall, the first of the season. She whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, baby. You found what I was too afraid to reach for." Across the city, Dennis lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the memory of her still on his lips. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about work or profit or deadlines. He was thinking about a little girl who'd written a letter that changed everything, and a woman whose love, even unspoken, had already begun to heal him. Winter in New York had a way of making everything sharper, the cold slicing through wool and steel, the light turning golden and brief before the dark swallowed it again. But that winter, something softer lingered in Monique Edwards's world. The night after Thanksgiving changed everything. It wasn't the kiss alone, though she thought about it constantly. Every breath of it still caught in her memory. It was the way Dennis had looked at her after. No hunger, no conquest, just quiet certainty, like he had finally found what he didn't know he'd been searching for. But love, as Monique knew, never arrived without testing its strength. A month later, in the soft grey of January, Monique stood in her living room surrounded by boxes. The letter from her landlord was still pinned to the fridge. Rent increase effective February 1st. It might as well have been a countdown clock. She'd looked for apartments for weeks. Everything decent was either too expensive or too far from Kayla's school. The reality was simple and cruel. They were out of time. Kayla, sitting cross-legged on the floor, looked up from her colouring book. "Are we moving soon, Mummy?" Monique smiled faintly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, baby. We're just looking for the right place." "Will Mr. Turner visit us there?" The question hit deep. "Maybe," she said softly. "If we're lucky." The truth was she hadn't told him. Not about the rent. Not about the eviction notice tucked in her purse. Because how do you tell the man you're falling in love with that you're losing your home? At Turner Holdings, Dennis noticed before she said a word. He saw the fatigue in her eyes, the way she lingered at her desk, long after everyone had gone home. He saw her check her phone with that flicker of dread, the kind that comes when you're waiting for bad news. One evening he approached her as she was packing her bag. "You've been quieter lately," he said gently. "Everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Just a lot on my mind." "Monique," he said, his voice dropping to that calm, steady tone that always disarmed her. "You don't have to do this alone." Something in her cracked. "I'm losing the apartment," she whispered. "Rent went up and I can't cover it. I've been trying to find a new place, but nothing's working." I didn't want to say anything because it feels like failing. Dennis stepped closer. "You haven't failed. You've done everything right. You just need someone in your corner." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've never had that." "Not really." He reached out, brushing the tears from her cheek. "Then let me be the first." She shook her head. A week later, Monique and Kayla stood in front of a brownstone in Brooklyn, unsure what to say. It was quiet, lined with trees heavy with frost. Warm light glowed through the windows. Dennis turned the key in the lock. "It's not much," he said, "but it's safe. Close to Kayla's school. 2 bedrooms, a little backyard. I talked to the owner. She's a friend. No rent for the first few months. After that, we'll figure it out together." Monique blinked hard, tears threatening to spill. "Dennis, I can't." "You can," he interrupted softly, "because I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it with you." She looked around the empty space, the sunlight pooling on the wood floor, the faint scent of paint, the hum of possibility. Kayla ran ahead, peeking into rooms. "This one has a window. Can I have this one, Mommy?" Monique laughed, wiping her cheeks. "It's yours, baby." Dennis watched them from the doorway, mother and daughter standing in the middle of an empty home, and somehow it felt fuller than any mansion he'd ever lived in. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew he'd just found his home too. Over the following weeks, the brownstone became something more than walls and windows. It became laughter, morning pancakes, late-night movie marathons. Dennis visited often, first under the pretense of helping with repairs, then with groceries, then simply because he couldn't stay away. One night after Kayla had gone to bed, they sat by the window with mugs of tea, snow falling silently outside. Monique leaned against the frame, her voice quiet. "You could be anywhere right now. A man like you doesn't usually end up in a place like this." He smiled. "A man like me? You're successful, powerful. People look up to you. I'd trade every bit of that, he said, for a night like this. She looked up, eyes meeting his. Why me, Dennis? He exhaled slowly. Because you see the world the way I wish I did. Because when you talk to people, they feel like they matter. Because you don't love from convenience, you love from truth. She turned away, trying to steady herself, but the tears came anyway. I don't know how to believe in things that last. I've lost too much. He moved closer, his hand finding hers. Then let me stay long enough to prove you wrong. The quiet between them deepened, heavy with meaning. When he kissed her again, it wasn't new, it was inevitable. By spring, the house had changed with them. Plants bloomed on the windowsills. Photos filled the walls. Kayla in her new room. Dennis helping her with homework. Monique smiling like sunlight. Their love wasn't flashy. It was steady, patient, the kind that made ordinary days extraordinary. And then one evening, Dennis took her back to the restaurant where they'd had their first company dinner, the one where she'd been nervous, careful, unaware of the way he'd already started falling. The lights were low. A small band played jazz in the corner. When dessert arrived, there was a ring resting on the plate, simple, elegant, exactly her. Dennis got to his feet. Monique Edwards, he said, voice trembling with emotion. You once told me love wasn't something you trusted anymore. That life had made you careful. But I've watched you love your daughter with everything you have, and I've watched you teach me what it means to be seen. You've brought light into my world when I didn't even know I was living in the dark. So if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life protecting that light. Marry me? Monique's breath caught. The room blurred. She covered her mouth, tears streaming freely now. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Dennis. When he slid the ring onto her finger, applause rose around them. But all she heard was his heartbeat against hers. Their wedding was small, just family, a few friends, and the little girl who had started it all. Standing proudly as flower girl, Kayla had insisted on reading something at the ceremony. She climbed up onto a stool, holding a paper decorated in pink hearts. Once upon a time, she began, my mommy was sad. But then she met Mr. Turner, and he made her laugh again. I think that's what love is, when someone helps you find your smile. So now I'm glad she said yes, because I always wanted a dad who loves her like she deserves. The crowd melted. Monique covered her face, overwhelmed, while Dennis bent down and lifted Kayla into his arms, kissing her forehead. I love you too, sweetheart, he whispered. Later, when they danced, the lights soft and golden, Monique rested her head against his chest. Do you ever think, she murmured, that maybe everything that broke us was leading us here? He smiled against her hair. Every scar brought me closer to you. Outside, twilight faded into evening. Inside, warmth gathered, laughter, music, family. And as the night stretched on, Monique thought of all the ways her life had changed. The eviction notice, the sleepless nights, the little letter written in purple crayon. It had all led here, to this home, this love, this peace. Dennis whispered in her ear, You brought light into my life, Monique. Don't ever forget that. She smiled, eyes glistening. And you showed me it was safe to shine. Later that night, after everyone had gone, the house was still again. Monique stood in the doorway of Kayla's room, watching her daughter sleep. Snow drifted softly against the window, catching the glow from the streetlight outside. She turned toward Dennis, who stood behind her, his arm slipping around her waist. Looks like she's happy, he murmured. She is, Monique whispered. We all are, and for the first time in her life she believed it. A year after their wedding, New York woke to spring again. Morning light streamed through the brownstone windows, scattering gold across the living room where Kayla's school drawings, still covered the fridge, and laughter lingered in the air like music. Monique's world had changed, not with the flash of miracles, but with quiet, everyday love. And now in her arms was the newest piece of that love, their baby boy Gabriel Turner. He was small, soft, and impossibly perfect, his tiny fingers curled around one of hers, his breathing steady against her chest. Dennis sat beside her on the couch, his arm around her shoulders, unable to stop smiling. He looked at his son as though the world had just begun again. I still can't believe it, he whispered, his voice full of wonder. A year ago it was just us three. Now look at us. Monique leaned against him, exhaustion and joy mingling in her smile. He's got your nose, she murmured, and your stubbornness. Dennis laughed quietly, kissing her forehead. And your heart. God help us all. Kayla tiptoed into the room, her curls bouncing, still in her pajamas. She peeked at the bundle in Monique's arms, eyes wide. Can I hold him now? She asked softly. Monique nodded, easing the baby into her lap. Kayla stared down at her brother, awestruck. "Hi, Gabriel," she whispered. "It's me, your big sister. You don't have to be scared. We've been waiting for you." Dennis's chest tightened as he watched them, Monique radiant in the morning light, Kayla whispering to her brother, the baby blinking up at them like he already knew he was home. Monique looked up at him, eyes full of warmth. "We did it, Dennis." He reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "Joe," he said softly, "you did it. You brought light into everything, into me." She smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "No, we did it together." The baby stirred, letting out a tiny sigh, and the three of them laughed quietly, the sound soft, full and whole. Outside, the city hummed, unaware that in one small brownstone, love had rewritten its own story. And as Dennis leaned in, resting his forehead against hers, he whispered, "He's the proof of everything we fought for." Monique looked down at their son, then back at him. "He's the light we made together." The baby's hand twitched, finding hers. The morning light deepened to gold. And for the first time in forever, everything felt exactly right. "Thank you for staying until the end." This story was never just about love, it was about healing, about finding light again when life had dimmed it. It was about believing that even after heartbreak, something beautiful can still grow. If this story touched your heart, even for a moment, then it has done what it was meant to do. Keep believing in love, in second chances, and in the quiet magic of new beginnings. Until the next story, take care, stay kind, and keep your heart open. Vintage Mike Tales.